What would drive a quiet teenager to commit an unthinkable act against someone they called family? And what secrets from his past could reveal the truth? As we delve into this video, don't forget to like this video, share with friends, and subscribe to True Crime Shield for more gripping stories. It was a sunny afternoon on April 24th, 2022, in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. The small town, known for its picturesque hiking trails and the serene banks of Star Lake, was alive with the laughter of children and the hum of everyday life. Nestled among these trails was the Jacob Leinenkugel Brewing Company, a local landmark that echoed the town's rich history. That day, 10-year-old Lily Peters pedaled her bike down one of her favorite paths, a route she knew as well as the back of her hand. Her family described her as adventurous, full of life, and brimming with curiosity. Lily had spent the afternoon visiting her aunt's home, a place she often frequented. But as the sun dipped lower and the evening hues began to paint the sky, Lily's absence began to stir concern. When she didn't return home by 9 p.m., her father, Alex Peters, grew increasingly uneasy. Panic crept in as he contacted the police, initiating a search. Little did anyone suspect this would be the beginning of a horrifying discovery that would send shockwaves through their tranquil community. The community rallied overnight, flashlights piercing the darkness as volunteers scoured the area. Police focused their efforts near Lily's usual biking routes, particularly around the trail by the brewery. Her bike was discovered, abandoned and eerily untouched, close to a wooded area. It was a discovery that made hearts sink and minds race. As the search stretched into the early hours of April 25th, whispers of fear began to replace hopeful optimism. By morning, police had expanded their search perimeter. The sight of uniformed officers and search dogs turned the once peaceful trails into a scene of dread. What they uncovered next left even seasoned officers stunned. Morning light seeped through the trees as officers combed the dense woods. Just beyond the path, hidden in the underbrush, they found her. Lily Peters' lifeless body lay mere steps from where her bike had been discarded. The earth seemed to hold its breath as investigators processed the scene. The discovery was brutal and heart-wrenching, shattering the collective hope of the community. News of the tragedy spread rapidly, turning the town's atmosphere from anxious to mournful. Police cordoned off the area, securing it as a crime scene. Forensics teams moved meticulously, collecting every piece of evidence: a stick, disturbed soil, faint footprints. The once serene trail was now a stark tableau of violence and despair. As the sun rose higher, illuminating the grim scene, the town of Chippewa Falls began to reckon with an unimaginable reality. One of their own was responsible. With the body found, investigators turned their focus to Lily's final hours. Witnesses recalled seeing her leave her aunt's house with her cousin, Carson Petersberger, a 14-year-old who had been a familiar face in her life. The two had reportedly headed towards the trail together, an outing that seemed innocent at first glance. But as detectives retraced their steps, troubling details began to emerge. Neighbors reported hearing faint cries from the woods around dusk, sounds dismissed as children playing. Surveillance footage from nearby homes showed Carson and Lily entering the trail, but only one figure emerging. This evidence painted a chilling picture, hinting at a betrayal of trust that defied comprehension. Each new detail tightened the noose around the case's central mystery. Chippewa Falls was a town where everyone knew everyone else's name. The revelation that a teenager might be responsible for such a heinous act sent ripples of disbelief through the community. Candlelight vigils sprang up overnight, their flickering flames a fragile symbol of hope and unity amidst despair. Parents clutched their children a little tighter, while whispers of fear and speculation echoed in grocery stores and coffee shops. Local law enforcement held press conferences, their measured words unable to mask the horror they felt. "We are doing everything in our power to bring justice for Lily," promised the police chief, though his eyes betrayed a weight heavier than his badge. Grief counselors were deployed to schools, where classmates struggled to comprehend the loss of a friend. Through it all, Lily's family remained cloistered in their home, seeking solace in each other while grappling with the knowledge that one of their own might have committed the unthinkable. Questions swirled, but answers remained elusive, leaving a void filled only by sorrow and confusion. On April 26th, just 2 days after Lily's body was discovered, police announced the arrest of Carson Petersberger. The teenager's demeanor during questioning had raised red flags, his inconsistent statements riddled with contradictions. A search of his room revealed disturbing evidence, journals containing violent fantasies, along with internet searches that hinted at premeditation. The arrest sent shockwaves through Chippewa Falls. To some, Carson had been a quiet boy, reserved but polite. Others described him as withdrawn, a child of difficult circumstances who struggled to find his place. But these fragmented impressions now took on darker significance, reframed by the weight of the accusations against him. As he was led into custody, cameras captured the image of a young boy with downcast eyes, his expression a mixture of fear and detachment. The town's collective heartbreak deepened, torn between mourning Lily and grappling with the monstrous possibility of Carson's guilt. The justice system's wheels began to turn, but the path ahead promised only more anguish. Investigators delved into Carson's life, seeking to understand what could drive a teenager to commit such a gruesome act. His family's troubled history came under scrutiny. Carson's father, Adam Berger, had been convicted of possessing child pornography, a shadow that loomed large over Carson's upbringing. Letters and court records painted a picture of a boy caught in the crossfire of fractured relationships and familial discord. Psychologists were brought in to assess Carson's mental state. Their evaluations hinted at deep-seated anger and feelings of inadequacy, compounded by isolation. Teachers and peers recounted moments of odd behavior, subtle warnings that, in hindsight, seemed glaringly obvious. But amidst the psychological assessments and character testimonies, one question remained unanswered. Why Lily? As these layers of Carson's life unfolded, the community's grief transformed into a collective reckoning. Could they have seen this coming? And more hauntingly, could it have been prevented? The courtroom became a battleground, with prosecutors and defense attorneys clashing over Carson's fate. The prosecution argued that the crime's brutality demanded he be tried as an adult. This was not a moment of impulse, they contended, presenting evidence of Carson's meticulous planning. That Carson's defense team, however, painted a different picture. They described a broken boy shaped by neglect and trauma, who deserved rehabilitation rather than retribution. He's still a child, they argued, urging the court to consider the possibility of redemption. The proceedings were fraught with emotion, each piece of evidence and testimony slicing through the courtroom like a knife. Lily's family sat stoically, their pain palpable, while Carson's mother wept silently. The judge's decision loomed large, a choice that would shape the lives of everyone involved. The trial began with a series of witnesses, each one peeling back another layer of the grim story. The first to testify was a neighbor who lived near the trail where Lily's body was found. Her voice trembled as she recounted hearing faint, desperate cries that evening. She admitted she hadn't thought much of it at the time, brushing it off as children playing. Now, her guilt was palpable, her words heavy with regret. The prosecution leaned on this testimony to establish the timeline, highlighting the moments when Carson and Lily were last seen together. Photos of the trail, Lily's bike, and the crime scene were projected in the courtroom, their stark imagery cutting through the air like a blade. The jury shifted uncomfortably, the weight of the evidence settling over them like a suffocating blanket. Meanwhile, Carson sat impassively, his expression unreadable. To some, he appeared cold. To others, simply overwhelmed. His attorney's hand rested reassuringly on his shoulder, a silent promise to fight for his future. But as the neighbor's testimony concluded, it was clear that the truth, no matter how obscured, was beginning to take shape. The forensic expert's testimony was clinical yet haunting, a juxtaposition of science and horror. She described how the evidence painted a timeline of events, the struggle, the violence, and ultimately, Lily's tragic end. Her words were precise, devoid of emotion, yet the details they conveyed were anything but sterile. Fragments of bark from the stick used in the assault were matched to Carson's clothing, a damning connection that silenced the courtroom. As she spoke, jurors took notes, their faces a mixture of concentration and revulsion. The prosecution emphasized how the evidence proved intent, pointing out that the stick had been chosen and wielded with deliberate force. Carson's defense team countered by questioning the reliability of such evidence, suggesting it could have been contaminated or misinterpreted. Outside the courtroom, media outlets seized on these revelations, broadcasting every word to a public ravenous for answers. The forensic details, though gruesome, captivated the nation, turning the trial into a spectacle. For Chippewa Falls, however, it was a painful reminder of the darkness that had invaded their peaceful town. The community's collective wound grew deeper with each revelation. Carson's mother, Lori, took the stand, her testimony a raw and unfiltered glimpse into a fractured family. She spoke of Carson's early years, describing a child who was once joyful and curious, but had grown withdrawn after his father's imprisonment. Her voice cracked as she recounted the challenges of raising him alone, the nights spent worrying about his anger and isolation. The prosecution questioned her parenting, insinuating that neglect and instability had contributed to Carson's behavior. Lori bristled, but held her composure, insisting she had done her best under difficult circumstances. She described her son as a product of his environment, shaped by factors beyond her control. "He's not a monster," she said, tears streaming down her face. "He's still my boy." Her plea for understanding was met with mixed reactions. Some jurors seemed moved by her words, while others appeared skeptical. Outside the courtroom, public opinion was equally divided. Some saw Lori as a mother desperate to save her child. Others viewed her as complicit, blaming her for the choices that had led to this moment. Midway through the trial, a piece of evidence emerged that shifted the narrative. A digital forensic expert testified about Carson's online activity, revealing a disturbing pattern of searches and save content. The data painted a portrait of a mind preoccupied with violence, control, and darker impulses. This revelation sent shockwaves through the courtroom, forcing even Carson's defense team to reconsider their strategy. The prosecution argued that these searches demonstrated premeditation, bolstering their case that the crime had been planned. The defense countered by framing Carson as a troubled teen exploring taboo subjects without fully understanding their implications. But the evidence was damning, a digital breadcrumb trail that seemed to lead directly to Lily's tragic fate. As the expert's testimony concluded, the courtroom fell silent, the gravity of the revelations hanging heavily in the air. For many, this moment marked the trial's turning point, a shift from ambiguity to clarity. The path to justice, however, remained fraught with questions and emotional turmoil. The trial's final phase began with impassioned closing arguments from both sides. The prosecution painted Carson as a predator who had betrayed his cousin's trust in the most horrific way. They recapped the evidence, from forensic findings to witness testimonies, weaving a narrative of intent and brutality. This was not the act of a child, they declared. This was the act of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The defense, however, urged the jury to see Carson as a product of his environment, a boy shaped by neglect, trauma, and a lack of guidance. They argued that his actions, while unforgivable, were not beyond redemption. This is a child who needs help, not a life sentence, they pleaded, their words heavy with emotion. The jury listened intently, their faces betraying the weight of their responsibility. As the attorneys concluded their statements, the judge provided instructions, reminding them to consider the evidence impartially. The courtroom was then cleared, leaving the jury to deliberate. The fate of a community, a family, and a young boy now rested in their hands. The courtroom's air was thick with tension as the defense prepared their argument. Carson's attorney, Michael Cohen, had painted a picture of a broken boy, a child shaped by neglect and the shadow of his father's sins. He argued that Carson's youth and troubled upbringing made him a candidate for rehabilitation rather than retribution. Cohen's voice rose and fell, weaving a narrative of redemption that sought to counter the brutal facts of the crime. Outside the courthouse, protesters clashed. Some carried signs demanding justice for Lily, their voices rising in unison, while others, though fewer, argued for leniency for a child they believed was a victim of circumstance. News vans lined the streets, reporters clamoring to capture the charged atmosphere. Inside, the prosecution presented their rebuttal. Chippewa County District Attorney Wade Newell delivered a powerful closing argument. His words cut through the courtroom like a blade, describing Lily's final moments with harrowing clarity. He reminded the court of Carson's premeditation, the chilling confession, and the unspeakable cruelty. The gravity of the crime, he argued, demanded adult consequences. The jury's faces revealed little, but the weight of their task was evident. They were tasked with deciding not only Carson's fate, but also grappling with the broader implications of justice. As the judge dismissed the court for the day, murmurs filled the room, and the community braced itself for the verdict. Outside, the sky darkened, mirroring the uncertainty that loomed over Chippewa Falls. Did I end the quiet hours of the evening? The streets of Chippewa Falls seemed to exhale, momentarily free of the day's turbulence. Yet, behind closed doors, families whispered about the trial. Carson's name carried a weight that seemed to distort time, drawing parallels between his crime and the legacy of his father, Adam Berger. The prosecution's deep dive into Carson's upbringing painted a haunting picture. Testimonies from his grandmother and neighbors revealed a child caught in the crossfire of chaos. His father's arrest for possessing disturbing images had left an indelible mark, and his mother's struggles with substance abuse only compounded his isolation. Carson's childhood, they said, was one of shadows and silence. Despite the defense's arguments, whispers of Carson's own demeanor surfaced. Teachers and peers described a boy who oscillated between withdrawn and explosive. He was neither wholly invisible nor entirely present, a figure both seen and unseen. These fragments of his life, moments of vulnerability interspersed with glimpses of a darker edge, created a mosaic that the jury would have to interpret. In a modest home not far from the courthouse, Lily's father sat surrounded by photographs of his daughter. Each image told a story of a girl brimming with life, her laughter captured forever in still frames. As he stared at her smiling face, the weight of the trial's outcome pressed heavily on him. Justice for Lily was more than a legal verdict. It was a reckoning with a loss that words could never fully capture. The morning of the verdict arrived with a heavy sky, gray clouds mirroring the somber mood of the town. The courtroom was packed, every seat occupied by reporters, community members, and family. The jury had deliberated late into the night, and now their decision would finally be revealed. Carson sat at the defense table, his face pale but unreadable. His attorney sat beside him, his expression a mix of determination and apprehension. Across the room, Lily's family sat together, their grief carved into their faces. The judge entered, and the courtroom fell silent. The jury's foreperson rose, holding the verdict in trembling hands. The room seemed to hold its breath as she read the words that would determine Carson's future. Guilty on all counts. The words reverberated through the room, a seismic shift that left both relief and sorrow in its wake. Carson's shoulders slumped, and for the first time, tears welled in his eyes. His attorney placed a hand on his arm, but the gesture seemed small against the enormity of the moment. Lily's family clung to each other, their sobs a raw and unfiltered expression of both justice and the unrelenting ache of loss. As the judge set the sentencing date, the community outside erupted in reaction. Justice had been served, yet the cost of that justice was a pain that would linger in Chippewa Falls for years to come. The day of sentencing arrived with an air of finality. The courtroom was once again filled to capacity, the weight of expectation hanging heavy in the air. This was the day when Carson's fate would be sealed, the culmination of a trial that had gripped not just a town but the entire state. The prosecution began by reiterating the heinous nature of Carson's crime. They argued that his actions were calculated and cruel, leaving no room for leniency. The district attorney's voice rang clear as he described Lily's vibrant life and the future she had been robbed of. Carson's defense, however, pleaded for mercy. Michael Cohen painted a picture of a boy broken by his circumstances, arguing that life in prison would extinguish any hope of rehabilitation. He asked the court to consider Carson's youth and potential for change. When it was Carson's turn to speak, his voice was barely audible. He apologized to Lily's family, his words halting and strained. Whether his remorse was genuine or calculated, no one could be certain. The judge's sentencing was swift but heavy. Carson was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 40 years. The decision was met with mixed reactions, relief for some, frustration for others. Outside, the town grappled with what justice meant in the face of such tragedy. For Lily's family, it was a step toward closure. Though the void she left behind could never truly be filled, did I end the weeks following the sentencing. Chippewa Falls began to settle into an uneasy quiet. The trial that had dominated the town's consciousness was over, but its echoes lingered. The bike trail where Lily's life had been taken remained a somber reminder, flowers and tributes marking the spot. Local schools held discussions about safety and mental health, spurred by the tragedy. Parents hugged their children tighter, and conversations about accountability and compassion took on a new urgency. The community wrestled with questions that had no easy answers. Could Carson's path have been altered? Could Lily's life have been saved? For Lily's family, life became a series of milestones she would never reach. Birthdays passed without her laughter, holidays felt hollow, and every small joy was tinged with her absence. Yet, they found ways to honor her memory, creating scholarships and programs to support children in need. Carson's incarceration began quietly. Reports from the Juvenile Detention Center described a boy who kept to himself, his future uncertain. His name became a cautionary tale, a reminder of how deeply trauma and neglect could scar a life. The town of Chippewa Falls, though forever changed, began to heal in its own way. The scars of the tragedy were visible, but so was the resilience of a community determined to learn and grow. Lily's story became both a warning and a legacy, her light persisting even in the darkest of times. As the seasons changed, so did the rhythms of life in Chippewa Falls. The trial faded from headlines, replaced by the steady pulse of daily life. Yet, for those closest to Lily, the loss was an ever-present shadow. Her father, Alex, found solace in community projects, channeling his grief into building spaces where children could play safely. The town's focus shifted toward prevention. Programs addressing childhood trauma, mentorship, and family support gained traction. Local leaders emphasized the importance of early intervention, determined to prevent another tragedy from taking root. Carson's story, though painful, became a case study in the complexities of juvenile justice. Advocacy groups debated the ethics of sentencing minors as adults, while legal experts dissected the trial's implications. His name evoked strong opinions, a symbol of both accountability and the failure of systems meant to protect. For Lily's friends, memories of her brought both smiles and tears. They spoke of her kindness, her dreams of becoming a teacher, and the way her laughter could brighten any room. School assemblies and community events often included moments of silence in her honor, her legacy woven into the fabric of the town. Chippewa Falls moved forward, but never forgot. The tragedy became a chapter in its history, a reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring strength of community. In the face of unimaginable loss, the town chose to honor Lily by striving for a brighter, safer future. Years passed, and the memory of Lily Peters remained vivid in Chippewa Falls. Her name graced community centers and scholarship programs, each initiative a testament to her impact. The bike trail where she was found was transformed into a memorial garden, a place of reflection and remembrance. Lily's father continued his advocacy work, often speaking at events about the importance of protecting children and fostering community connections. His voice, though tinged with sorrow, carried a message of hope and resilience. Carson's fate unfolded in the shadows, his story a reminder of the consequences of neglect and unchecked pain. Reports of his time in prison painted a picture of a man grappling with his actions, though the world's eyes had largely moved on. For the children of Chippewa Falls, Lily's legacy became a source of inspiration. Her story was a reminder of the importance of kindness, vigilance, and community. Schools adopted programs emphasizing empathy and awareness, determined to create a generation more attuned to the struggles of others. In the end, Lily's life, though tragically short, left an indelible mark. Her memory became a beacon, illuminating paths of healing and growth. Chippewa Falls, though scarred, emerged stronger, bound by a shared commitment to ensuring that no child's light would be extinguished too soon. And in the quiet moments, when the wind rustled through the trees of the memorial garden, it was as if Lily's laughter still echoed, a gentle reminder that love endures, even in the face of loss. If stories like this captivate you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more chilling cases. What do you think led to such a tragic turn of events? Do you believe justice was served? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective.